673-525. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here on Facebook and KXAN.com. I'm Arezow Doost. This week we launched one of our biggest projects we've been working on for several months, Save Our Students. It really focuses on our kids' mental health and when it comes to what schools are doing, what districts are doing, and what they need to be doing. You've probably watched pieces all week. We've been rolling out different stories. We've been talking to counselors, to teachers, to parents. And one of the things we've heard quite a lot about is just how technology impacts our kids now. And one of the things I wanted to look into with my team was the impact that you have at home with young kids. As many of you know, some of you know, I've got 3 kids under 6 years old, and I always wonder and ask, what could I be doing at home that's going to set them to have success when they start school, go to school. We started having a first grader this year, so I'm already starting to see some of those impacts. And I have to tell you, the things I thought I was doing right, after working on this project, Save Our Students, it made me make some big changes to our family. And one of the people that helped me make those changes was this amazing woman right here, Mandy. And I'll let you introduce yourself to our viewers and audience.
Sure. My name is Mandy Melendez. I'm an owner at Nurture Family Counseling in Cedar Park. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a registered play therapist, so I specialize in work with parents and their children.
And you help families navigate screen time.
Yeah, it's become a big part of the work that we do, is helping families understand and parents understand the impacts of technology on behaviors that they're seeing at home that are troublesome for them or challenging at school, and how technology might be impacting their development.
And I can go into how Mandy helped my family and kind of walk you through what we did. Major change and shift in how we were treating screen time. But also, please ask questions. If there's something that you're going through, if you have a suggestion, if there's something for Mandy that you want to know, she has done a ton of research and is using that research to help navigate screen time. But one of the biggest things you're seeing, tell us, what are you seeing, especially with the younger kiddos?
So things that we would see typically in the office, things like kiddos struggling with impulse control or behavioral problems, struggles sleeping, difficulties with aggression. Those kind of things can sometimes, not always, but sometimes be linked back to things that they're viewing or ways that they're using technology. And so helping parents kind of sort out the threads of what can we be doing differently to support optimal development for our kids becomes really important.
You're treating kids as young as 3 years old.
That's right.
What are you noticing in them that's directly linked to screens?
Well, as part of our intake process with parents who come in seeking therapy for a 3-year-old, they recognize something's wrong, right? Parents don't get to our door without having tried a lot of different things to get either the behaviors they're looking for or cooperation or less aggression or whatever it is. So by the time they reach us, they've really struggled a lot and they've worked very hard to try and figure out the problem and they're just not resolving it. So we take a pretty holistic approach looking at all things that might impact mental health, including sleep and nutrition and their social interactions and how are they interacting with their family members. And among those things is how much screen time are your kids getting? And sometimes that yields some really interesting information and can be really helpful in us finding a good course of support and treatment for the family.
They're spending hours a day.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely. And certainly this is not uncommon and not, limited to any type of family. Kids are sometimes it's all at once. They're coming home from preschool and parents set them up with something on a screen so that they can prepare dinner and get some laundry done, and then they need a little bit of downtime, and then they think, we'll watch a show together, and then the kid's doing something that feels educational, and so it seems like time well spent, and before you know it, you've got a child who's been on a screen from 3 p.m. until 7 or 8 p.m. So it adds up really quickly.
And I want, we've got a team here with us. This is the second time this week that we're doing this, so we're all kind of going with the ropes. But our team is here, and I want, Kate, if you could please put up the 2 graphics we talked about. This is the research that Mandy actually pointed me to when we were working on this piece. The first one kind of talks about just more screen time, what it means from the studies, recent studies that are out, greater chances of anxiety, depression, eating disorder, and attention problems. And the recent study that we highlight in our web article, it says that, and it shows that kids who spend more than 7 hours a day on screens were twice as likely as those spending 1 hour to have been diagnosed with one of those things.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise you.
Not really, no. It's sad. Certainly, none of us want this for our children, right? And I do think parents really do try to give their kids the best that they can. It's sometimes a struggle to know what's supportive and helpful for our kids and what's actually creating problems down the line. Because kids' brains are still developing, they're not as able to handle the loud noises and the increasingly exciting moments that are part of experiencing a movie or a show or a game that might be on their iPad, right? And so it's changing the ways that their brains develop. So even if it's not causing a problem right now, potentially it's creating a problem down the road.
And for those of you just joining us, thank you. We're starting to get questions, and one of my colleagues just handed me the phone, and I want to go over some of the questions. So what Julie asked is, what about kids viewing adult content worse than rated R as entertainment? This is a question from Julie.
Yeah. Well, not knowing specifically what she's asking, I think the implications are pretty clear that it's not healthy. There's a reason those rating systems exist. If you're letting your 5-year-old watch PG-13 movies, they're viewing content their brains are not developmentally ready for, and that can absolutely create a sense of anxiety. Things like a rated R movie are well beyond the scope of a younger child's ability to process that. So there's great resources, websites and things like that can help parents decide what to share with their kids. Knowing your child well is really important, but thinking that your 8-year-old is mature enough to handle a rated R movie, it's worth considering at what cost, right? What are they being exposed to? Is it necessary? Is it helpful for them? Is it supporting their sense of safety in the world, or is it potentially diminishing that? The other thing is that from a development perspective, those things like rated R movies are increasing kind of a chemical load on their brain that is, it doesn't feel good to them. And it might feel exciting, but it's also taking them very quickly from really stimulating scene to the next really stimulating scene. And when we do that over and over and over again, we create a brain that is not able to stay focused on any one thing for a very long time because it's been trained to refocus quickly. And one that's really been exposed to a lot of chemicals that aren't really great for their young minds to be developing around.
There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
If, for parents who are dealing with screen time, you see it at restaurants and the trails, kids shopping, kids are on screens. And look, this is not meant to parent shame anybody. No. I have a confession, my kids use screen time. But with that said, the Academy of Pediatrics does have guidelines for us all to follow. I'll go over the guidelines, and then Mandy, if you want to add anything. Sure. But the Academy of Pediatrics says 0 to 24 months, no screen time. 2 to 5 years old, only 1 hour a day. 6 years and older, they really don't specify time limits.
So that's a fairly recent change, and they've said, sort of parental discretion. I do think that if parents were aware of the potential long-term impacts, we'd be limiting that. And, I agree, my kids get screen time too. They certainly wish they got more. It's fun and exciting in the same ways that they wish I would let them have ice cream for breakfast. But, part of our job as parents is to recognize where there are potentially some things that aren't great lifelong habits, even if they don't have a short-term impact. And, much like letting them have ice cream for breakfast every day, at some point we want them to be able to make good, healthy decisions for themselves. And in the meantime, we're in charge of protecting their development in their bodies and their minds. So a little bit is okay, and even according to the Pediatrics Association, right? A little bit is okay, but it's about being mindful about it and not using it as a substitute for real life and the other experiences that they need to be having in order to develop optimally. And that's things like spending time outside, engaging with people, struggling with something that's boring, and managing to tolerate that little bit of distress, right?
I mentioned my family, and I'll use my family as an example.
Sure.
I've got a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
You have your hands full.
And it's crazy.
Yes.
And honestly, during the day, I'm at home with them.
Yeah.
And so if I need to just have a minute to make a phone call, research a story I'm
Sure.
working on, it has been the iPad,
Right.
which I was turning to. And honestly, I thought we had a really good handle on it. So they would probably be on iPad for maybe an hour, hour 15 a day.
Okay.
And this was usually in the afternoon. But after we sat down with you and talked about this piece, and then the parents who we talked to, we kind of did an examination of what we were doing.
Oh, and it's so hard, right? It's so hard to change when something is working well for your family, right?
And I didn't believe that what you were suggesting could happen for our family. So let's walk through
Yeah.
what you suggested to do.
Yeah.
You told me not to cut it out immediately, but let's talk about putting out the toys, like the independent play and how that can get you the same thing as
Right.
screens.
Right. Yeah. So I do remember your look of a little bit of disbelief. You're being very polite, but it was a little disbelieving that, well, what will my kids do? And I said, what did you do? Right? You didn't have iPads when you were a kid. And they will find something to fill the time. Kids are ingenious about finding ways to entertain themselves, and they're really especially if they're elementary age, this is peak creativity time. They can have fun with a paper bag, right? So going slow can really work. Remember that they're used to this, and we don't necessarily want to create more anxiety by changing their whole world. So they're used to, I come home and I get some iPad time, right? And so scaling back a little bit at a time and putting out something to replace. And so making the Play-Doh available that's been sitting in the closet for however long, or whatever that looks like for your family, right?
Right, and outside time.
Yes, it's
pointed that
critical,
out.
right? There's actually some really lovely research about spending time in nature and how protective that is of mental health, and that's true for kids too. So when we think about screen time, it's not just are they doing something not useful on the screens, but also what are they missing out on in exchange for that time, right? So if we're sitting inside on a screen, we're not outside finding out what bugs look like, or digging in the dirt, or whatever it is. And those things are really supportive of optimal growth for kids.
And so, for example, for our family, after we looked at what we were doing, we decided to scale back. So they were on screens, on iPads, maybe an hour 15, as I mentioned before. After we cut back, we average probably an hour now. But I have to tell you, the first week and a half, 2 weeks was rough.
Yeah.
I mean, we had tantrums, just a lot of begging, to the point where it was really like concerning and frustrating that they had gotten emotionally to that point.
Yeah.
But I honestly reorganized our house. I put out toys in places that didn't have toys before.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just did little things so that whenever they are busy, I was able to make my phone calls, research a story. Now I am, at least. Now there are times where they still will ask for iPad.
Sure.
But when we say no, it's not that tantrum, like on the ground emotional breakdown.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on there. I mean, first of all, kudos to you, because it is hard to make changes when you have kids and a job and things to do. It's difficult to change what's already working well. But think of it a little bit like that screen was their lollipop, right? And you're kind of handing them a lollipop every time you needed to make a phone call or whatever. And I think most of us know now that wouldn't be a healthy way of managing our kids' time. And there's some similarity, right? And nobody's suggesting that, you can't have any of this, but you saw, I think, the impact, right? Kids really get accustomed to it, and having it taken away feels like a punishment. And there's also physiologically some changes, right? I mean, they crave the hits of dopamine that your brain is producing when you're exposed to all those bright flashing lights, and you get the treasure or whatever it is on the game you've been playing. Those things are designed to make us feel good and want more, and so taking it away, kids are having exactly the response that we would expect. They don't like it. Yeah. But over time, they get used to it, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
But it took time and patience.
It does. You have to be patient and just know to expect a little bit of challenge.
And we're taking your questions too, so please feel free to jump in at any point. I've got a question actually from Selena.
Okay.
She says, it's terribly sad to see little children in the grocery store using a technology as a pacifier, or to see parents with their nose in their cell phone while walking a child in a stroller instead of talking with the child, describing what they see on their walks. Parents need to cut their screen time also, and that was a big thing you told me.
Yeah, and and Selena, it's true, right? I mean, I think we can all do that, but we have to also remember that parents are human too, and so we are just as susceptible to the things that our kids are. I would like to eat ice cream for breakfast, right? It's tempting to stay on these games instead of engaging in real life. It's tempting to just watch TV instead of read a book, right? It's easier, and it flashes lights at you, and it's exciting, and frankly, it works in a lot of ways, right? Kids are really engaged with it, and so handing them that gets them to be quiet. It takes a lot of strength and conviction on a parent's part to say, this is not what I want for you. I want more and better for you, and I'm willing to invest that time. But I would hate to, have any parent feel ashamed of using that at times, because we're human too, right? Parenting's hard.
And the parents also, you actually, when you said that, it made me think about how often we would go to our phones.
Yeah.
And, scroll through Instagram. I'll be the first to admit, parenting is hard. There are a lot of hours in the day where I just need a minute to think,
just to breathe.
Or just to breathe with 3 kids, with any kids. It's crazy at home. And so I would go to Facebook, Instagram, just to have those few minutes.
Sure.
But that's actually setting the example too.
Yeah, it is. Our kids, unfortunately, they do as we do. They don't do as we say. So we can say, no ice cream for breakfast. But if we eat ice cream for breakfast, then, we're creating an environment that says this is actually what adulthood looks like. And children model themselves after us. We're incredibly powerful models for our kids. And so one of the best things you can do for a change of any kind of behavior, really, not just screen time, but anything your children are struggling with, is evaluate what am I showing them about this, right? And so if what we're showing them is don't ever be bored, pull out your phone, that's how they learn to handle boredom, right? And if we show them don't be angry, go watch a show, that's how they learn to manage those emotions. And so helping show them what we would like for them to do sometimes means taking a look in the mirror, and recognizing where maybe our habits are impacting theirs.
That's hard.
It's so hard. Yeah.
So we've got one of our own, Mandy, who just had a little baby.
Yeah.
And she's asking, what are some recommendations to encourage older children, like teenagers, to cut back on their screen time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, this is where knowing your particular child comes in really handy. You'll want to look at a couple of things. If you have a kiddo who is persuaded by logic, not a ton of teenagers, but they are out there, point them to the research, right? They'll help them think long term. How is this impacting you? It feels good right now, and it is training your brain to crave this level of stimulation. So we've seen consistent decline in people's ability to focus for long periods of time, people's ability to tolerate discomfort, and those are really critical long-term skills. So helping them pay attention to that. Keeping in mind that even when you have a teenager, important to empower them insofar as it is healthy. And at some times we have to be the parent who holds those boundaries and says, I'll let you make a decision within these parameters, but if it goes beyond this, I'm going to decide for you that this isn't healthy, right? We wouldn't let our kids drive if they weren't safe to drive when they're teenagers, right? And we don't let them, make choices that they're just not prepared to make. But helping them learn to make empowering choices incrementally. When you show me you've made this kind of decision or this level of decision well, then you get to move up to the next decision-making process. And so if your child is managing screen time relatively well, but you notice they're disengaged from, events where maybe it would be better if they could put it away, then helping remind them, right? We all need a little nudge sometimes, right? Even as adults, and, we need somebody to say, hey, it's dinner time,
Yeah.
put that down.
And we've been taking your questions. I've got one more from Jessie. She says, what if you are homeschooling and using an iPad and the kids taking advantage of it?
That's a good question. So media for kids should really be used in a public place. So the kitchen is a good spot for that, or a dining room table where you're regularly engaging with them. And that's a safety issue, and among other things, right, is helping make sure that you're actually monitoring who they're interacting with and what they're viewing. But setting boundaries for kids with screen time is very much like setting boundaries in any other area of your life. Letting them know what your expectations are and explaining what the benefits of following that are and the potential downside if they don't follow it, right? And that might look like, I'm making something up, but you may do your schoolwork and then have X amount of time on here. If you choose not to do that, then you choose not to have free time in the future. Or there are other potential ramifications, right? You can do homeschool potentially without those devices or without privacy and that kind of thing.
And if you're joining us now, thanks for being a part of our conversation. We rolled out this huge project, which we've been really working on for months, Save Our Students. And this is one piece of a huge aspect, project, perspective. And what you're looking at right now, this is our homepage, Save Our Students TX. And there are not only stories from the different counselors from 5 different school districts who sat down with us and talked about what they're seeing and what they wish parents knew, to our team going across the nation to find solutions and see what's worked for one state. Can it work here? It's all on our webpage, and there's also a list of resources for you, for anyone you know. It is really a good place to start and see what speaks to you. Mandy is joining us because we talked to her for our piece, which aired at 5 o'clock today, and which you can catch online. But one of the reasons we wanted to talk to her was we heard from the counselors that what happens and starts at home impacts what they're doing and tackling. And so what are things at home us parents could be doing to set our kids up for success when they go to school? And one of the questions that often comes up is, well, what's the difference between screens versus TV? When you would just let them watch TV?
There's not. I don't think there's much of a difference at all. I mean, really what you're doing is putting your child in front of something to passively receive information, whatever that is. And so, it's a little different than, say, reading a book, where I have to actually imagine the scenarios, see the pictures in my mind. I have to engage fully and with all the parts of my brain. Whereas a screen like a television, an iPad, a video game, all of those things have them passively accepting information, and oftentimes it's very stimulating. So all those flashy lights and things like that are designed to keep kids hooked on that. So there's a big difference between that and other things, but television, computers, iPads, all of it is kind of part of the same package.
And for you guys, joining us and who've been part of this conversation, thank you. You can always go to our Facebook page and become a member and continue to have this conversation with us. Post what's you're dealing with, what you've encountered, and how it's helped your family, or what you've seen in your school district. So just join the conversation by becoming a member of our Facebook group, Save Our Students. All you have to do is go to KXAN's Facebook page or the Save Our Students website to find the link. We've already had a lot of conversations back and forth with not only educators but parents about how they're dealing with mental health in our kids.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful that there's so much awareness being brought to this too, right? Because these are not new problems, but we didn't realize maybe a generation ago just how prevalent they were. And so really getting to see what's going on with kids and help them early is really meaningful.
We are a generation that's dealing with this very problem.
Yeah, that's
not
right.
before us.
Nope, that's exactly right. I was even just talking to my mom the other day, and this was not something they dealt with, right? They had their own struggles for sure, and parenting's never been easy, but this is uncharted territory. This is the first generation of kids and the first generation of parents that are having to navigate how do we manage screen time is it educational, as some camps have us believe? Is it damaging, as some camps have us believe? And where do we find the middle ground between helping kids be savvy in ways that are supportive for their future growth and jobs, and protect their development so that, they are able to be really emotionally and mentally present for those things in the future?
I don't know about you guys, but when I hear the different theories on it, oftentimes my reaction is cut it all. But then that doesn't work. So what are some realistic things parents can do?
I think every family is different. I think setting a boundary that everyone follows is important, and negotiating that as a family in as much as is appropriate can be really helpful. So if you have, somebody asked about teenagers earlier, if you have teenagers in your house, this is a great time to have a discussion with more information. I think most people would make changes if they had more information, right? And so, helping people in our families understand, why does this matter to you? Why does it feel important that we make changes? And what changes are sustainable for us? What can we live with? And this is the same kind of conversation that you would have if your teenager wanted to get a job, or your younger child wanted to take on a new sport, right? It's talking about just how much are we willing to commit to? Why do we think that's important? And kind of getting everybody's buy-in.
And Kate, if you could pull up some of the pictures that I had shared with you, I want to kind of go through these, because this everyone that was involved in this project made a difference in how we are now doing things at my house. This is actually our photographer Richie with the Banaski girls. So Alex and Sarah, they used to have a lot of screen time, and their mom tells us, the family's from Cedar Park, the mom says that she noticed like huge emotional changes in her oldest, and decided, you know what, screen time and game time is making a huge emotional impact on you, so we're gonna have to make some changes. And she says her changes took a while, but look at this. So this is some of the things that they do. They go and find their toys and they play with their toys, and mom doesn't have to tell them a million times, go do this, or go use your imagination, or this is your creative time. But so they now definitely have that creative time, but they also still get a little bit of iPad time. So for instance, 4-year-old Sarah gets about 30 minutes, mom tells us, after she's cleaned up all her toys, after she's done some reading. Her older sister, Alex, it's been even condensed more. So mom has taken 30-minute increments and then even cut that into 15-minute segments over the week, because it made her personality just so different.
That's a really good point. Different kids have different sensitivity levels to these things too, just like different kids are sensitive to different foods or how much sleep they get, right? Some kids do okay if they miss a nap. Some kids are falling apart if they miss a nap. So it's a really good point that just because a child is older or younger doesn't mean that they need or want more or less. It's also down to parents to kind of observe what's working well for your child and what's not, and is this supportive of how you want them to be able to experience their world, and how amazing that they made all those changes.
You're not saying cut it.
No.
But one aspect, watch together.
Yeah. So, this is a part of our existence, right? Like it or not, this is a really big part of the way we exist in the world now. And so, if we say have none, potentially we're missing out on something that could be a really good connecting family activity. Having a family movie night and snuggling up on the couch can be a really special and important memory for families. Experiencing certain shows that you all really like can be useful. And even just watching things together and then processing them, talk about it afterwards. So if there are elements of it that feel like they were scary or a little unexpected, those are great things to just pause and talk about with your kids. And how did you experience that? Was that hard for you? Was it scary for you? My own kids, even sometimes I think something felt a little scary or violent, and they'll say, well, that was okay, here's why, and they feel okay about it. And sometimes they have a strong reaction to something that I didn't know they would. They're individuals. And so giving them the opportunity to process it together and talk about it, those can all be really good in connecting family activities that lay the ground for, this is how we manage feelings of anxiety in our family or feelings of stress in our family, right? So there's a lot of potential there. We just don't want to overdo it, right? There's maybe too much cost to do it often. But absolutely, the things kids are viewing and how much they're viewing can impact behavior in a big way. And it sounds like the Banaski family was really able to make some changes that supported their kids getting to develop ideally. And look at all the wonderful things they're learning now about themselves, that they're problem solvers and that they don't have to be bored. They can find things to do and they can be creative. Those are wonderful lessons for them to learn about themselves that they wouldn't have had the chance to experience with more screen time.
One of the families we feature in our 6 o'clock piece, which is coming up, is the Youngbloods. And Kate, if we could show the picture of the Youngbloods. Gerald Youngblood is the founder of Tanki. So Tanki is a gaming app for kids, and here they are with our photographer making a silly face, with Gerald, his son, and then my son. That is my oldest. His name is Zaid, and I wanted to take him along so he would see what I'm talking about when we're going to be cutting screen time. But Gerald tells us that his solution wasn't necessarily to cut it, but he, was sitting there and he was involved watching with his son and realized what was out there just wasn't safe. So he decided, okay, it's time to create something. And from right here in Austin, he created the app Tanki. And pretty much it is, you go on there, it's safe for kids 6 to 12 years old, and it's a platform, it's a gaming platform. So what that means is, kids now really love to watch other people playing games, what they're called influencers, right, in the gaming world. And a lot of what was happening on other platforms, just there was ads that were popping up that were inappropriate, whereas when you go to this app, you really don't have a lot of room to venture to a lot of other places. There's not a lot of contact with people because you just respond with emojis, you watch videos. And Gerald says that they are trying to just give parents some peace of mind. But he pointed out and said the bottom line, that screen time comes with, earning some, you read a book or you went outside and did something. So now you deserve some screen time.
So they're treating it like, like candy, right? A little bit is fine. We want people to have balance in life and develop healthy habits, and that takes learning to make effective and appropriate choices for kids.
And Wendy Gonzalez, she actually pointed out, join the screen-free parenting group. Screens too young leads to behavioral issues. Yes, Wendy, and actually we want to bring up this webpage. Mandy's the one who told me about it. This website, so 2 parents are behind it, and they decided to come up with activities. Okay, there's like 1 million activities that you can do with your kids besides giving them an iPad.
Yep.
And you're familiar with this website.
Oh, sure. I mean, they have a ton of great ideas, but I think you really said it when you said they have things to do with your kids, right? Like, the thing that kids are missing sometimes when they're engaged with a lot of screen time is engagement with other people. And, when they're playing with a sibling or playing with a parent, they're learning so many critical social skills. And those things are really indicative of future success in so many ways, right? So playing with them is wonderful. And kids can really learn to do a lot on their own too, and find out just how ingenious they are at finding ways to entertain themselves and explore the real material world as their brain is developing. There'll always be time for screens later, but when they're young, it can be really impressively influential for them to spend time doing fun things like that.
So if I'm using screens when we're at the restaurant just because I want to keep the peace, or I'm at the grocery store, that's probably not a good idea. Should I back away from that? How do you handle this?
Yeah, I would think about what you want your kids to learn. And if you want them to learn to behave in a restaurant, you're going to have to teach them how to behave in a restaurant. And that's probably going to mean there's going to be we've had them too, some rough days at restaurants where, you're not really enjoying your meal that much because you are repeating over and over again what appropriate table manners are, or, to lower your voice, we're not screaming about whatever's happening, right? So if you put a screen in front of them, you're depriving them of that opportunity to learn. You've pulled them out of school for the day, right? And said, this time we go to the restaurant, you're not learning anything. And when they go to the grocery store and they can't tolerate the boredom, or they're just so excited they want to pull everything off the shelves, if you're depriving them of that opportunity, at some point you're going to be really frustrated that they haven't learned how to manage those environments, without a distraction.
And that's key.
Yeah, we have to learn to tolerate things being a little uncomfortable, and a little uncomfortable is having dinner and having to wait for your food to arrive, or going to the grocery store and not being able to take everything off the shelves, right? And they can do that with structured support from parents. That's them learning to tolerate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Mandy.
Oh,
and
it's my
thank you
pleasure.
guys. We've been following your questions here on this Facebook Live. Thank you for sending them in. And again, this is part of a bigger project we are doing and we've been rolling out all week called Save Our Students. Head online to KXAN.com for more on the pieces that are impacting our kids, not only in school, but as you heard from Mandy, outside of school and what should be done in Mandy's perspective to prevent a lot of what's happening. Also, if you continue to have questions or you watch this later and have questions, please post them. I will be sure to respond. I'm no expert, but I will reach out to Mandy and try to get you an answer. And again, thank you so much for being part of this conversation.